Empires rise, expand, and conquer, but the bigger they grow, the more fragile they become. The Quincy were no exception. Unlike the Soul Reapers who enforce balance through order, the Quincy seek to upend everything. Their war isn't about survival. It's about reclaiming what they believe was stolen from them. At the heart of it all is Yhwach, a ruler who isn't really leading an army, but preaching a doctrine, one that promises his followers power, unity, and a return to a forgotten past. But no empire lasts forever. The Quincy's blind faith in their god king, their rigid hierarchy, and their relentless expansion ensured their own downfall long before the war was ever lost. In today's video, we'll first explore Yhwach's theology and his desire to restore the old world order, long before the Soul Society reshaped existence. Then we'll break down how the Sternritter's cult-like loyalty turned them into pawns in a game they never truly controlled. And finally, we'll take a look at how imperial overreach sealed the Quincy's fate, proving that no empire, no matter how powerful, can escape collapse. If you love Bleach storytelling and uncovering the deeper themes behind your favorite series, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on bell notifications below. Trust me, this is a story worth dissecting. Every empire begins with a single figure, a ruler who doesn't just claim authority, but who embodies it. For the Quincy, this figure is Yhwach, the progenitor of their people, the architect of their ideology, and the divine force behind their conquest. He is not just their leader, he is their beginning. Unlike the Soul Reapers, whose authority is bureaucratic and institutional, the Quincy's hierarchy is entirely built around Yhwach himself. He is their origin, their source of power, and the foundation of their belief system. Every Quincy traces their abilities, and even their existence, back to him. They are not just an empire, they are his creation. But Yhwach's ambitions extend far beyond leading a nation. He does not see himself as a mere king or conqueror. He sees himself as the rightful ruler of existence itself. His vision is not to build a new world, but to restore an old one, a time before the Soul Reapers carved up reality and imposed their new system of balance. To understand Yhwach, you have to understand what he lost. The Soul King, his father, was once an all-encompassing force, existing in a state beyond division. Then the Soul Reapers mutilated and imprisoned him, turning him into a figurehead for their so-called balance. The Soul King went from the heart of existence to a glorified battery, and Yhwach, well, he took that personally. And so, his war is not simply about dominance, it's about restoring what was stolen. To Yhwach, the current structure of existence is unnatural, an aberration that must be undone. His father's current state is an embarrassment to him as well. He does not see the Soul Society as a ruling force, but as usurpers, tyrants who cut apart a god and reshape the world in their own image. His conquest is framed not as expansion, but as a return to divine order. This kind of thinking is deeply tied to millenarianism, a belief system found in various religions and imperial movements. The world is seen as broken or corrupted, and a chosen figure, often one with divine lineage, will bring about its restoration. The idea of a final, cataclysmic war that resets the world isn't new. And the Quincy, well, they're literally fighting the 1,000-year blood war, a name that could not be more on the nose if it tried. Millenarian figures tend to think history is just a waiting room before their arrival. And for Yhwach, the last 1,000 years were basically just the intermission before the big comeback. This belief is also reflected in literature and various mythos, particularly in figures like Lucifer from Paradise Lost. In Milton's epic, Lucifer was once a being of supreme power, but after his fall, he refused to accept his diminished role. Instead, he rallies followers under the promise of restoration, preaching that he will reclaim his rightful place. Like Lucifer, Yhwach's ideology is not about forging something new, it's about undoing a theft, reclaiming power, and reshaping the world according to what he believes is its true form. And much like Lucifer, Yhwach sees himself not as a rebel, but as the one correcting an injustice. But the reality is far more complex. Uryu Ishida, one of the last surviving Quincy's of the Ishida bloodline, stands in stark contrast to this narrative. While Yhwach preaches a return to the old world, Uryu is a product of something new, a Quincy caught between his own history and the reality of the present. His family rejected Yhwach's vision, choosing to separate themselves from the Quincy Empire. Uryu, in turn, is forced to reckon with a past he didn't choose and a future that demands his loyalty. He is an outlier in a system that values lineage and obedience above all else. A ruler is only as powerful as the people who enforce his will. For Yhwach, that power comes in the form of the Sternritter, his elite core of Quincy warriors, chosen by him, empowered by him, and ultimately disposable to him. But the Sternritter don't just serve Yhwach, they worship him. To them, Yhwach isn't just their leader, he is their god, the force that grants them strength and dictates their place in the New World Order. His word, absolute, his authority, unquestionable, and in return for their faith, he bestows upon them a shrift, individual powers that make them stronger than any ordinary Quincy. There's just one problem. The power he gives them, it's not theirs, it never was. Because the moment Yhwach decides you are no longer useful, he takes it back. And when that happens, they don't just lose their abilities, they die. And that's what separates Yhwach's rule from the Soul Reaper's military structure. The Gote 13 may enforce order, but their power is institutional, built on ranks, tradition, and a chain of command that exists beyond any one individual. Yhwach's empire, however, is entirely autocratic, with power concentrated in a single figure. His authority is divine, his decisions final. His followers live and die at his discretion. This kind of blind obedience to an absolute ruler is nothing new in history. Many authoritarian regimes have been sustained by fanatical devotion, where individuals are expected to sacrifice everything for a greater cause, without ever questioning whether that cause is truly their own. And the Sternritter are the perfect example of this. Let's take a look at their clothing. While the Sternritter themselves are not entirely uniform in appearance, the white Quincy uniforms symbolize something far greater than just a dress code. They reflect a doctrine of purity, a belief in superiority that extends far beyond military ranks and into the very identity of the Quincy people. To Yhwach, the Quincy are not just warriors, they are his chosen people, and their survival is proof of their inherent supremacy. The whiteness of their uniforms reflect their separation from other beings, not just aesthetically, but ideologically. While the Arrancar uniforms are seen as an inversion of the typical Soul Reaper uniforms, the Sternritter represent a complete visual rejection. A rejection of the impurity of Hollows, the corruption of the Soul Reapers, and the imperfection of the world that Yhwach seeks to remake. This obsession with purity and supremacy have clear historical parallels. Many regimes throughout history have used dress, symbols, and aesthetics to reinforce the ideology of dominance, creating a visual identity that separates the elite from the rest. The Quincy's white uniforms function in such a way, establishing them as a force apart from and above all others. But here's the irony. For all their belief in superiority, the Sternritter are not valued as individuals. Their power is conditional, their status is temporary, their devotion is repaid with disposability. Yhwach does not elevate them because he sees them as worthy, he elevates them because they are useful. And when they cease to be useful, he does not hesitate to erase them. If there's one Sternritter who exemplifies total devotion to Yhwach, it's Royd Lloyd. Royd, and his twin brother Lloyd, possess an ability that allowed them to become other people, to copy their appearance, their memories, and even their personalities. Royd could imitate the mind and soul. So when Yhwach needed a perfect stand-in to fight Yamamoto, Royd became Yhwach himself. Think about what that means. This wasn't a disguise or a tactical trick. This was Royd erasing his own identity to embody his leader. He didn't just follow Yhwach, he became him. There is no greater act of submission than offering up your entire self to another person's will. Royd Lloyd didn't just fight for Yhwach, he existed for him. And what was his reward for unwavering faith? Death. Not by the hands of the enemy, but by Yhwach himself, who arrived after the battle and ended Royd without hesitation. Because in the end, Royd was never meant to live. He was meant to serve, fight, and die in Yhwach's name. And that is the purest distillation of what it means to be a Sternritter. They are warriors, yes, but more than that, they are vessels. Their existence is defined by their utility to Yhwach. This is why Uryu Ishida's presence in the Sternritter is so significant. Unlike the others, he was not chosen for his loyalty. He was chosen as Yhwach's heir because he represents something different, an anomaly in Yhwach's perfect machine. The other Sternritter follow without question. Uryu does not. He is a Gemish Quincy, an outsider by their own racial hierarchy. And yet, Yhwach elevates him above even the most devoted of his followers. Why? Because absolute obedience is easy to predict. Dissent is harder to control. And that's what makes Uryu dangerous, not because of his strength, but because of his ability to question what the Sternritter blindly accept. His very existence challenges everything Yhwach's empire stands for. The Quincy have spent centuries rebuilding their numbers, ensuring that only pure-blooded Quincy hold power, only for their god to place a mixed-blooded outsider above them all. To the other Sternritter, that's not just confusing, it's heresy. And yet none of them dare question it outright, because to question Yhwach is to die. But Uryu isn't one of them. He has spent his entire life outside their hierarchy. He is not bound by the culture of obedience that defines the Sternritter. Yhwach may have chosen him, but Uryu isn't compelled by the same instinctual level of loyalty as the others. And that's the fatal flaw in Yhwach's rule. Because no empire can sustain itself when faith becomes fear and obedience becomes a death sentence. We'll explore that next. What happens when an empire expands too far, consumes too much, and collapses under the weight of its own arrogance? Every empire reaches a breaking point. Expansion can only continue as long as there are resources to sustain it, soldiers to enforce it, and enemies to conquer. The moment an empire overextends, it starts to consume itself. History has a habit of repeating itself. The Roman Empire expanded until it crumbled under its own weight. The British Empire stretched itself so thin it started losing territories faster than it could repaint its maps. And Yhwach, he wasn't just stretching his empire. He was trying to unravel the very fabric of existence itself. Unlike the Soul Society, which enforces balance, even if through authoritarian means, Yhwach's war was never about control or governance. He did not seek to rule the current world. He sought to end it entirely. His goal was destruction, not domination. And that's where the Quincy stand apart from traditional empires. They weren't expanding for resources, land, or political power. They were expanding to eliminate the structure of reality itself. The war wasn't just about wiping out the Soul Society. It was about removing the cycle of life and death, dismantling the concept of balance, and returning everything to the primordial state, a world free of division where only Yhwach's vision remained. But here's the flaw in that plan. If your empire collapses before you finish unraveling the world, you lose. When a hollow is destroyed by a Soul Reaper, its spirit is purified and reintegrated into the balance of existence. When a hollow is destroyed by a Quincy, it is permanently removed. For most Quincy, this may just seem like a more efficient way to exterminate their enemies, but for Yhwach, it was a necessary first step in dismantling the very foundation of reality. The Soul Society fought the Quincy not just out of self-preservation, but because they knew that if Yhwach seceded, existence itself would collapse. This was a war over whether life itself should continue to function as it had for millennia, or whether it should be wiped clean and reshaped under one being's will. And to Yhwach, balance was a prison, a system imposed by the Soul Reapers and upheld by the Soul King, both of whom he sought to eradicate. But here's the problem with trying to dismantle the system while still existing within it. You need an army to fight your war. You need structure to tear down structure. And if you devour your own people before you've won, well, you're just ensuring your own defeat. If there's one moment that seals the fate of the Quincy, it's Auschwitz, the event in which Yhwach strips the power from his own people to restore himself and the Schutzstaffel. This act is significant for several reasons. One, it proves that Yhwach values his own existence over the Quincy's cause. His followers believed in his vision, but the moment he needed more power, he turned on them without hesitation, even before they finished their own battles. Two, it accelerates his own downfall. By draining his own forces, he's ensuring that his empire collapses before his grand plan is complete. And finally, it exposes the illusion of his leadership. The Sternritter may have worshipped him, but their faith could not save them from his own hunger for power. This is the moment that Yhwach stops being a conqueror and starts being a parasitic force feeding on his own empire. Now, you could make the argument that he needed that power to finalize his goal, but at the end of the day, it's a dead-end road for the Sternritter. He built a war machine, only to consume it before it could accomplish its purpose. Historically, this is the classic mistake of a leader who assumes his vision alone is enough to sustain his empire. Many conquerors throughout history have ruled with the expectation that their followers would never question them, that loyalty alone could maintain the structure of an empire. But history has proven that when a leader turns on his own people, the empire crumbles from within before the external enemy ever delivers the final blow. And for the first time, the Sternritter begin to realize the truth. No empire survives when its own soldiers turn against it. And that is exactly what happened in the final days of Yhwach's war. The Quincy, who once believed in his divine right, begin to see him for what he truly is, not a god, but a man who can't be trusted. One by one, the cracks in his empire grow. His most loyal followers begin to fall away, not because they have been defeated by the enemy, but because they have been abandoned by their leader. Even Baz B, one of Yhwach's most fervent followers, realizes too late that his devotion was meaningless. He believed in the cause, fought for the Quincy's return to power, and in the end, he was discarded without a second thought. His rebellion comes not from an ideological shift, but from a betrayal too great to ignore. And he wasn't the only one. The Bambis, some of Yhwach's most brutal and loyal fighters, were sacrificed just as easily. Their faith was unwavering, but that faith was built on the belief that their power made them indispensable. Yhwach's empire had no need for devotion, it only had a need for obedience. And then there's Uryu Ishida. Throughout the war, Uryu was positioned as the heir to Yhwach, the next in line to rule the Quincy. But Uryu, unlike the others, never truly believed in Yhwach's vision. He followed not out of faith, but out of necessity, because he knew the only way to stop Yhwach was from within. Uryu is the ultimate counterpoint to the Quincy Empire. He doesn't seek domination. He does not follow blindly. He does not submit to a ruler who sees his own people as nothing more than a resource to be spent. And in the final battle, it is Uryu, not a Soul Reaper, not a Hollow, but a Quincy, who enables the final blow to be taken against Yhwach. Because in the end, Yhwach is not defeated just by his enemies. he is also defeated by his own kind, the very people he thought he had absolute power over. Yhwach spent 1,000 years building his empire, declaring himself the supreme ruler of all existence, and in the end, he got taken down with the help of a Quincy intern who spent most of his time in high school arguing with Ichigo. Fate really does have a sense of humor. Yhwach's empire falls for the same reason all overreaching empires do. It was built on destruction, not sustainability. It was fueled by faith, but undone by betrayal, and it demanded loyalty, but discarded those who gave it. And once that loyalty was gone, there was nothing left holding it together. The Soul Society may have fought against the Quincy, but the truth is, Yhwach destroyed his own empire long before the war was lost. His hunger for power ensured that there could be no future for the Quincy under his rule, and his obsession with ending the current world order made him forsake those he should have taken care of. And so the Wandenreich, who once sought to end the world's cycle and reshape existence, were left with nothing. Their downfall was not a tragedy, it was an inevitability. This wasn't just another battle. It wasn't a small-scale conflict like with the Fullbringers where the Soul Society was barely even paying attention. This war changed everything. The Quincy weren't just defeated, they were dismantled. The Soul Society and its allies tore through their empire, shattered their ideology, and left nothing behind. Thousands died, the balance of the world barely survived, and the grand vision that Yhwach spent centuries building, gone. And that's the truth about war. It's not just about conquest, strategy, or even ideology. It's about who's left standing when the dust settles. And in the end, Yhwach's empire wasn't built to last. It was built to burn everything down. He thought he could rewrite existence itself, but instead, his own ambition ensured the Quincy would become nothing more than ghosts of history. And now that the final chapter of the war is written, the Quincy, who once sought to reshape the world, leave nothing behind. And with that, we close the book on the Enemies of Bleach series. From the Soul Society's authoritarian grip, to the Arrancar's chaotic struggle, the Fullbringer's alienation, and now, the Quincy's imperial downfall, we've explored every major faction and what they truly represented. So if you've been here for the whole journey, thank you. This has been one of my favorite deep dives into Bleach, and I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Which of these enemy factions had the strongest thematic impact? Which downfall hit the hardest? And of course, if you love analyses like these, stick around, because while the series may be over, there's always more to explore. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.